the Dream 100 Show. The epicenter of influence, collaboration, and exponential growth. You're about to discover the power of relationships. Dream 100 relationships. And you're one relationship away from a totally different business and life. This is your host, Michael Tesner.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 004 of the Dream 100 Show. In last week's episode, I talked through the three different audiences of Dream 100 people/businesses that you can put together. As a very, very quick recap, the first one was your Dream 100 prospects, but the asterisk to that is that those prospects need to have the ability to do a ridiculous amount of business with you. If your average ticket is $500, for example, they need to be able to do $25,000 or $50,000 a year with you in business to make it to that list. The second set of audiences was partners, referrals, affiliates. So people that already have your prospects on their list, their email lists, their social media channels. They're already walking into their retail stores. You have complementary products or services, and you can start to build those relationships up for ideally some referral and or partner relationships. And then the third audience was PR opportunities. So what are those Dream 100 PR opportunities? Radio, TV, news, magazines. What do those look like? As mentioned, that last audience, the PR one, I would highly encourage you to also do that at the same time as audience number one or audience number two. Highly recommend not doing all three at the same time. That just gets a little bit crazy, but if you have the bandwidth, the team, and the resources, it's not a bad thing to do. It's just a matter of really managing all this stuff at once. It can get to be a little bit complicated. Today's episode, I want to talk through kind of the next step. So you've identified your audience, and I'll pick a niche or two, and we'll talk that through. What do you do next? Do you start reaching out? Do you grab their contact details? How do you do that? Like, what do you actually do in this process? And there's going to be subsequent steps, but what I wanted to do in these first inaugural episodes is really kind of walk you through the framework, walk you through this is the how, and then from there, when we've got this groundwork laid, you've got the foundation, then we can start to build on it. Then we're going to start to do Dream 100 Live. I'm going to bring on different guests to talk through executing their Dream 100 strategy. I'm going to talk through case studies and a lot of other value add for you. But what I wanted to do is make sure that we are all aligned and kind of building on those building blocks of step by step by step so you have the framework. It's a lot easier to understand when you know, okay, great, which of those three audiences are we going to go after, for example? What kind of contact details do we need? Do we start with physical mail or digital or social, or do we send them long emails? Do we try and offer them money? Like, what do we do? So I want to build on that so that you're walking through the step-by-step process. This works 100% of the time if it's deployed correctly. That's the key there. Works 100% of the time when deployed correctly. Now, the math works out like this. 100 prospects that make it to your Dream 100 list. You're going to work those contacts, those leads, those opportunities, whatever term you'd like to use, for as long as it takes until they have said, don't contact me again. Now, there's going to be different triggers and different parameters, and we're going to scale up at some points when we see positive cues, and we might scale back a little bit if we've sent a few gifts, for example, when we talk through gifting, and they don't reciprocate any kind of thank you or anything like that. So there'll be different parameters. But if these are a Dream 100, and they have the ability to catapult and transform your business, I don't want you to stop. So you've got this list of 100. The math really starts to whittle down to where of those 100, you're typically going to wind up with 3 to 5 relationships. Now, it might be more. I've seen people wind up with 20 or 30 of them. I've seen people wind up with one of them. But the math has worked out. It's that whole compound effect. It's worked out in such a way that if you have the 100, you're going to, at the very least, wind up with one of those relationships transpiring into something amazing. Now, the beautiful thing with this entire strategy, again, is that we've talked through the criteria. I'm continuing to belabor that particular point, that it has to be able to transform your business. So when you're looking at all of the steps that kind of come after this, and some of them are going to require some investment in terms of gifts, for example, if you're analyzing the numbers and saying, okay, great, if that one relationship transpires to $50,000 in top line, what does that look like? What could that look like? And for every business, it's going to be very, very different. So depending on what your product or service is, it can be very, very different. But what I'm looking for you to do as we go through this process, you're going to start to really build this into a bit of a math equation. We're going to be plugging in numbers into a particular spreadsheet, or if you're using our Dream 100 software tool, it does that math for you as well, where you're plugging in like lifetime value and different things like that, and it's going to start to make some recommendations. But the whole point of 100 is so that we have the compound effect, we have the law of numbers on our side. So you've got this list. Let's say you've went with audience number one. So audience number one, you are going after your Dream 100 prospects, but prospects that are going to buy a heck of a lot more than the average person. So let's go to our niche list here and pick a niche. All right, so the dice landed on veterinarians. With everything, I do it ad lib, no preparation, so that I can kind of talk you through this live, so you're kind of seeing my thinking process a little bit. So if I'm thinking of a veterinarian, if I'm an average person, I'm coming in for a checkup once a year and then maybe a sick visit once or twice a year. So the average ticket or average kind of yearly value probably is maybe $300 to $500 on the high side. So if you have that particular average, now we've got to start thinking, okay, great. What would be someone that could have the average of $50,000? The one that comes to my mind quickly would be the SPCA. It would be different animal shelters. It would be different animal adoption agencies. It probably would be breeders. So I would start at that high level and I would list out all of the different options. So breeders, the SPCA, which is like an adoption agency. I might look at zoos. So there's, a couple of local zoos, for example. And I'm just thinking out loud here. Those probably would be, off the top of my head, those would probably be the best audiences. So if you think about a zoo, for example, yes, they have their team there, but what if their team needs supplemental services? What's the worst thing that's going to happen with reaching out to these Dream 100 prospects? They're going to say, no, not interested. And then you can continue to at least keep them on a list, keep them engaged a little bit, depending on how they reply with, well, I'm not really interested or not right now, depending. If you think about breeders, if they're breeding dogs on a regular basis, they might have 10 dogs, they might have 100 dogs that they're breeding, depending on the size of the operation. And with every dog or cat, for example, and I've only said dogs, but and I missed one of the big audiences would definitely be pet stores and independent pet stores. If it's a dog breeder, as an example, if let's say they have 25 dogs, and if you know the average with one dog is $300 to $500, and now they have 25, so now you have 25x. So I would make that list. So we have breeders, we have zoos, we have some of the different animal hospitals, for example, that may not have the level of services that you have. If it's a complementary service, for example, or they're going to have to reach out maybe if they have overflow, as an example. Pet stores, dog trainers could be interesting, but that probably would fall under the second audience. And this one, we're talking about people that would be exchanging money with you. But dog trainers could be interesting because they might have 10 dogs of their own as well. So if you think about people that have a lot of pets, but then even again, thinking bigger, the pet store one to me is definitely a huge one. They have to be taking those animals somewhere to get certain checkups, and if they're sick and their shots and things like that, and they have animals that are coming in on a regular basis. So what you would do then is leverage a couple of different tools. The one that we're going to refer to quite a bit, and the one that everyone is most familiar with, is ChatGTP. And we can start to leverage ChatGTP, and we can say, I'm looking to make a list of all of the different dog breeders in Orlando, Florida. I'm looking for a list of all of the pet stores in Orlando, Florida. I'm looking for all of the animal hospitals. And you continue to feed it the different prompts, and it's going to start to spit out all of the details. All of the details. So here are 10 pet stores, or here are 20 pet stores. So what you're doing is you're starting at that top level. We've selected our audience, and then we started to look at and building out that ideal person that's going to be able to do a lot of business with us. So we start at broad strokes, and then we're going to start to go to more granular level. So you have a tool like ChatGTP give you all of the outputs. Here are all the pet stores, for example. Here are all the dog breeders. Now, depending on how you like to organize this, ideally you'd be using our Dream 100 software, but if not, you can look to do this through a tool like Google Sheets, for example. I prefer everything to be cloud-based. So as you have that audience, now what you're going to do is you're just going to start listing it out. Okay, great. Here, let's just stick with the 10 pet stores. You list out the 10 pet stores. Now, from there, you have a choice. You can leverage other software tools and start to do some data mining, because really what you're looking for are who are those key decision makers at that particular business. I'm not interested in the sales manager at the pet store. I'm not interested in the customer service people. I'm always interested in the C-suite, or more importantly, I'm looking at who that head person is, who's the founder, who's the CEO. Now, if it's a smaller localized pet store, for example, it's going to be pretty easy to find the owner. You can leverage, tools like LinkedIn, for example, tools like Facebook. But time is money with all of this. So I don't want you to be spending 50 hours doing data mining. There's plenty of different people that can do it for you. We have a done-for-you service that we offer this. You can go to Upwork, you can go to Fiverr, and you can say, here are the 100 businesses that I have. I'm looking for the CEO, founder, partner, and maybe president as another job title. And you give that to someone, and they're going to then spit back a whole bunch of stuff to you. Now, from here, there's a lot of different paths that you can go. So I'm looking for initially, I want you to gather the names, but I'm really looking for the names, and then I'm looking for email address, and ideally you're able to find some kind of phone number and mailing address. If we're able to find a home mailing address, even better. That one can get to be a little bit trickier. But we've started to do some data mining, because everything else then is going to start to build on here. But you've got to make sure that you've got the right types of businesses that you've identified as those Dream 100. And then from there, it's ensuring you have the right contact on the other side. So it's a little bit of a laborious process. You're going to want to do some double checking. You might have two different people validate the data. Often what we've done is I'll have two different people. They're both leveraging different software tools, and they're giving me the files. And then we're going to compare and see how much difference there is. Okay, great. Of these 100, compared to these 100, we have 93% similar. Great. Let's look at the 7 contacts that are different. Let's go to the website. Let's double check LinkedIn. Let's even call the stores to make sure that you have the right person. We got to have that right person. And then there are lots of different tools that can pull their email address. Apollo, for example, is one that we use on a regular basis. But they can pull their email, they can pull the phone number, And obviously, you've got at least the addresses if they have a physical store address, for example, or a physical office. Very few people are not going to have at least that particular aspect. The address is just as important as the email, because as you're going to learn in subsequent trainings, this is not just let's send some cold email and see what sticks. This is going to be posting on their social media, sending emails, sending direct mail, sending gifts. We're really going to start to take the heat up as certain things happen, as certain triggers come back. And oh, great, they responded to this, then we're going to trigger to do that. Starts to build. So that physical address is very, very important. So let's recap. You've identified which of the three audiences you're going to go after. Now, if you were going after the second audience, so referral partners, it's the same kind of thing. So if we stuck with the veterinarian, a referral partner probably would be dog trainers, as an example. If an animal hospital wasn't necessarily conflicting with you, they might be a referral partner. And you're still looking for the same kinds of contacts. Who's the founder, the president, the CEO, partner, one of those particular job titles. Now, if it's a really, really large business, like a Fortune 500, for example, you're going to have to cast a wider net. And in those cases, you might have 10 different contacts, for example. Yes, we're going to try and start at the C-suite, but you might have to drop down a little bit and have some VP titles. So this really does vary quite a bit, and we can go into some more specifics if your audience is Fortune 500s or Fortune 1000. But a lot of the businesses that are deploying the Dream 100, they're local in nature. And if they're not local in nature, they might be niche specific in nature, for example. So being able to identify some of those potential strategic partners, there usually isn't, 250 different people in the C-suite. But if you're saying, hey, Michael, Disney's on my Dream 100, okay, great. We can find the email address of Bob Iger, I believe it's Bob Iger, of Disney. The chances, are slim that we're going to get a direct reply, but we can definitely try. But I'm going to want to have some other contact. Maybe there's a VP of partnerships or VP of strategic alliances. So you can start to look for some of those other job titles after you've identified the company and then really started to do a little bit more digging. And that's where, somebody on Fiverr, for example, somebody on Upwork, there's a lot of tools that can pull this stuff, but I really want you to spend more of your time on the strategic side. I want you to be spending more of your time aiming to craft the creative follow-ups, for example, and the gifts and thoughtful posting rather than being so in the weeds on how to find these people. So your action for today and this next step in the process that we just talked through was, what do you do after you've picked your audience? You start to build at the high level and write down all of the types of companies that are going to make sense for you to target. So we talk through veterinarians, and then from there, you're going to write all these down. You're going to give it to somebody. Again, you can do it yourself, but I promise you this is going to take hours and hours and hours. So leverage a tool like ChatGTP, put in the prompts of, I need businesses in this particular city. Give me 100, give me 10. Then you can add some additional layers on top of it, and then give that to somebody like that. You can use a tool like InfoUSA, but when you're only talking 100 contacts, for example, or let's say there's a couple hundred contacts because you're casting a little bit of a wider net with bigger businesses, they're typically not the best tool to purchase contact data. But even with that, it might only cost you a couple $100. I believe they have some minimums, but I still like to do it manually using multiple different tools. So after you've given them that data of, great, here are the companies, tell them what you're looking for. I want CEO, founder, president, partner, and then modify the job titles a little bit if you're going after bigger businesses. So if you were going after those pet stores, great, find me these particular people, send it back to me in Excel or on Google Sheets. Now you've got their name, their email, phone number, and a physical address. From there, you're going to continue to build on the strategy. You're going to start to build a little bit of a wider net, And we're going to start to craft what I like to call kind of the sales dossier, for example. But you're going to really craft that net so that you know these are the contacts, but here's all of the details about them. That's what we're going to talk about in the next episode. So you've got your contacts, you've picked your audience. Now we're going to start to build on, great, what do we want to learn about them? And then how are we going to leverage what we've learned to make sure that we have meaningful connections, to make sure that we're standing out from everybody else that might be executing a similar strategy. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure you tune in live next week. We'll continue to build on these different part series so that you have the framework for the Dream 100, and then we really can kind of take the training wheels off and really start to gain some momentum together. Thank you ever so much for listening. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.